I'm done. It's over. This torment has ended. It was alright. This is it, my favorite goddamn Disney movie. No joke, from the moment it released in 2010, Tangled has been my favorite Disney movie in the entire collection. And that seems to be something I'm surprisingly alone on. I don't find a lot of people for whom this is their favorite Disney film. It's usually Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, The Little Mermaid, or Aladdin, but I can find fault with all of those movies. I simply can't find fault with Tangled at all. Everything about it, I love. All my favorites are here. Rapunzel is my favorite Disney princess. Eugene is my favorite Disney prince. Mother Gothel is my favorite Disney villain. I've Got a Dream is my favorite Disney musical number. It's just, I love absolutely everything. Tangled is one of those movies that is nothing but sheer joyful energy from start to finish. Okay, maybe not quite in the third act when Mother Gothel shows her true colors and Eugene is dying and the healing magic isn't working. God damn it, Donald! I wasn't kidding a minute ago. Mother Gothel is my favorite Disney villain. I like that she's not a twist villain, but that she's a much sneakier villain. The audience knows her true nature, which means they can make Gothel as convincing as possible in order to really sell the whole emotionally abusive parenting trick. Films with these kind of villains who hide their real motivations tend to suffer from brain-dead audience syndrome, where the audience will wombify the villains into the most precious small babs and give them the Rebecca Sugar treatment, and Gothel is the kind of villain where someone could have easily gone, "See? She really cared about Rapunzel," like people do with Thanos had the movie not immediately made it clear to the audience that Gothel is a lying snake. I mean, people still try to sugarcoat Mother Gothel, but it's a lot more obvious that they're brainless and stupid. But even better than Gothel is Rapunzel. I love Rapunzel. She's my favorite Disney princess, and I've always loved protagonists who are just the sunniest children, and Rapunzel is competing with Sora for the title of sunniest child in all of Disney, even though she's not a child. Rapunzel has a Cinderella quality to her, where much of the investment in the story is simply wanting her to have the things that make her happy. It's a very simple desire that plays on a person's empathy. It's generally a very fun, simple movie, and coming off the aggressively complicated Princess and the Frog, it's nice to have a movie that is straightforward and simple. That's why I love it so much. It's just so fun and so good to have around that rewatching it always makes me happy, even if it doesn't have gay princesses. Okay, Wreck-It Ralph is probably one of the more glaring omissions in this project because a lot of people really liked it, but I got exactly 13 minutes in and I just simply couldn't watch anymore. Maybe it's just secondhand awkwardness, but the moment things got to the party in the first act, I just couldn't stomach it anymore. I know for a fact that Michaela only ever saw this movie for the Sonic cameo because she made the egregious mistake of liking Sonic in her formative years. That's literally the closest thing to appeal this movie has.
Why are you mean to the things I love?
Maybe Jennifer Lee's awkward dialogue could be easier to tolerate if there was something more appealing, like gay princesses. Apparently not. Okay, Frozen is a film I have very mixed feelings about. Every time I think of something I like about it, something wrong with it jumps right up beside it. It's got an interesting story about true love being universal, but it bungles it in a desire to mislead the audience for a shocking twist. It subverts the tropes of previous Disney films regarding love at first sight, but Tangled did it better, and Frozen's main method of delivering that idea is just to repeat it over and over and over again. It's got gay subtext, except it doesn't, and if it did, it'd be really cursed when you think about it. Oh yeah, and speaking of which, the relationship between Elsa and her sister is a really good framework for the story and the kind of thing Disney needs more of, but its execution in this film is so fucking weird. This is gonna fucking hurt. So yes, Frozen has a very interesting theme about love being universal, that true love doesn't necessarily have to be romantic love, demonstrated in how the troll says that only an act of true love will thaw a frozen heart, and everyone else just assumes that to mean a kiss from a lover. But where that logic falters is that you can kiss anyone, you don't even have to think about kissing someone, and they devalue the idea of true love's kiss by rushing for it so desperately. Ultimately, Anna's salvation comes not from true love's kiss, but by actively sacrificing herself to save her sister, who she loves so much she couldn't bear to see her be hurt. What makes that so impactful is that of all the characters in the movie, Anna had wanted to get out and experience life more than anyone else, yet in spite of the burning passion to live, she didn't even hesitate to throw herself in front of a fatal sword blow in a desperate effort to shield her estranged sister. She didn't just put Elsa's needs before herself, she threw away all the hopes and dreams she'd been nurturing for the last 13 years in a split-second decision. On top of how brave Anna is when she blocks the sword, it also shows how utterly selfless and forgiving she is. is. It's easy to forget this, but the audience is aware of Elsa's personal conflicts and difficulties and could fully sympathize with her. Yet by Elsa's own design, Anna had no idea what kind of person her sister is. Elsa had shut Anna out without explanation for 13 years and had seemingly abandoned her to bury and mourn their parents alone, had her locked up in the castle for years, and then imperiled the entire kingdom. After Anna has risked wolves, exposure, and hostile terrain to find Elsa, while keeping faith that Elsa was not malicious and that the endless winter was a misunderstanding, Anna finally finds her, but Elsa creates an ice monster to chase Anna away and accidentally strikes her in the heart with ice, which is killing her bit by bit. Worse, Anna doesn't see the look of shock on Elsa's face after she's struck, only the guilt, so she doesn't even know that it was an accident and that Elsa didn't strike out of temper. Elsa may have had good reasons for all this, but had we seen the movie purely from Anna's perspective, we could have easily been misled into assuming that Elsa was a villain. Yet in the end, Anna's love for her sister and faith in her is even greater than all the pain she caused. Anna's willing to sacrifice herself for the sister who had seemingly ruined her life. These are all good things to explore in a story, but the problem is that none of this stuff can really be as explored as it should be. Anna and Elsa's relationship takes up a good portion of the movie, but very little is actually explored with them, and how they feel about each other don't even fucking start, because the film is keeping this charade until the big twist ending. Everything is hamstrung by this desire to subvert expectations and create a twist. If the film had been straightforward about being about familial love, this probably would have been a lot more emotionally satisfying. I'd argue that Maleficent does it better because there's less of a metatext to the film as there is a character arc. Maleficent believes true love doesn't exist, so making true love's kiss be the only way to break Aurora's spell is an act of vengeful spite. It isn't until she ends up having to make sure Aurora makes it to her 16th birthday and she starts to get attached that she has to learn that love comes in many forms. It's ultimately the grief, anguish, and regret at having hurt someone who had become like a daughter to her. It helps that Maleficent explicitly makes the only way to break the curse be true love's kiss rather than simply an act of true love, because like I said earlier, anyone can kiss you. That's why being kissed by a total stranger won't break the curse. Being kissed by someone who loves her, regardless of what kind of love it is what breaks the curse. This is all presented as bitter cynicism from Maleficent, and for good reason, but it's ultimately a lesson she has to learn. The theme is part of her character arc. Frozen isn't doing that. It's more concerned with hammering the theme home to the audience by playing on their expectations and then smugly looking back like, oh, you were expecting romance? Well, don't you feel silly? Sounds like you have some things to learn. And how'd that work out for you, Jennifer? Oh yeah, that's right, it didn't. Likewise with the subversion of love at first sight as a Disney trope. I don't know if Jennifer Lee actually checked before writing this film, but that was handled in Tangled by having two characters fall in love after several days of mutually supporting one another, and even risking their lives for each other and not immediately getting married at the end. When Rapunzel starts to suspect Eugene has feelings for her, she doesn't say something about true love, she just says,
I think he likes me.
True love is not a theme of Tangled. Ultimately doesn't have a theme beyond live your dream and then find new ones to live. It's just a story that includes two people genuinely falling in love with one another, and it does more to tear down the old Disney tropes of love at first sight than Frozen ever could. The two things that dominated the discourse for Frozen more than anything else was not the theme of familial love or the subversion of old school Disney tropes. It was the perceived gay subtext of Elsa's entire story arc, as well as dragging Jennifer Lee for having absolutely no clue how estranged siblings behave. Frozen is certainly an enjoyable movie. It's not the best thing ever made, but it is pretty up there. It'll definitely have a spot in the top 5 when this is all over, but the entire film suffers from this overwhelming desire to be smart and clever when it really isn't as smart and clever as it likes to think it is, to the point where the phrase Anna has more romantic chemistry with her sister than she does with Hans is simultaneously a funny joke at the expense of how frail his engagement to Anna is, as well as an actual legitimate criticism of the film. It's a movie that desperately needs some gay print. Actually, you know what? This is a movie that should probably be a little less gay. Okay, so here's the thing. Big Hero 6 is an objectively good movie. It covers topics of grief and counseling in an interesting way and only suffers from too many characters and just some minor pacing issues. And I honestly do not care a single lick about it. I enjoyed the movie, I thought it was good, but the prospect of putting in enough effort to talk about it in a roundup is just soul-crushingly disappointing. And I feel the same way about Zootopia, a really, really good movie that I loved, and I just do not want to talk about it. To build off what I said a moment ago, because I don't really want to repeat myself, the reason Disney animated films fit into two categories. You have the princess films and the off-brand films. And it's become clear to me that regardless of how well they actually do, I just enjoy the princess films more. The off-brand films try really hard to be about things and have important messages, and while I recognize the objective quality in that, subjectively, I'm still just so sick of the desperate push cartoons make to be deep and adult that despite knowing on some level that Zootopia is better than Moana, I just get more excited about Moana because it's about characters first. The majority of the film is centered around Moana and Maui in a vast ocean where there is nothing as far as the eye can see, and everything centers back to either the pressure put on Moana to save the world and her desire to restore her people's Voyager culture, and Maui's desperate need for validation that becomes so all-encompassing that he horribly wrongs another living being in order to get it. I find both of those stories compelling, and the adventure serves the purpose of furthering that story. Moana is so uninterested in world building that it takes place in the middle of the goddamn ocean. This whole movie feels like both the better version of both Pocahontas and Atlantis now that I think about it. It has a lot of the same story beats and elements of both films, especially Atlantis' whole restore dying culture undercurrent, but with the culture being restored from within this time instead of whatever the fuck the writers of Atlantis were smoking. And there isn't a whole lot to say about it in the structure of the roundup because it is a deceptively simple film. You can cover most of what it's about in just a few sentences, and as such, it's a very approachable film. This isn't like Frozen, which is a rather densely packed film and as such requires more time to cover everything. Moana has two running stories and it handles those stories in a straightforward manner. It's damn good. Just needs gay princesses. You know, my biggest issue with Frozen 2 isn't the story or the writing for once, it's actually with the art direction. I know, crazy, but hear me out. So the film makes use of models from the first movie, save for a few updates in certain cases and some more powerful rendering technology, but for the most part the characters are all the same. Even the new characters fit in a shot with them aesthetically, though you can see some noticeable differences between them in terms of aesthetic design. But the environments are all in this pseudo-realistic, highly textured style which clashes really badly with the cartoonish aesthetics of the characters. It makes the entire film look like the Pirates of the Caribbean world in Kingdom Hearts 2, where you've got this realistic, grimy texturing to the environment, but then Sora, Donald, Goofy, and Pete are all their usual selves, and that sticks out like the sorest thumb. This isn't the case in every shot. I mean, the shots in the autumn forest tend to blend really well, considering all the colors on display. It's when they're in any environment that is green, brown, or gray, or darkly lit in any fashion that everything sticks out the most. And it actually took me a while to notice this. When the first teaser trailer dropped, the first shot is in this dark, gray, moody lighting on a shoreline, and I'm like, okay, what's this? And then you get a close-up on Elsa's face, and it's like, what the fuck? This is a Frozen movie? It looks nothing like Frozen. Actually, you know what? I lied. That's not my biggest issue with the film. The biggest issue I have with the film is the fact that they clearly had no genuine ideas going into this film beyond make another one of the things that made $1 billion. And you know what that means? What do we do when we're creatively bankrupt? World build. It's hilarious because watching the film, you can see the inklings of an interesting story with the whole issue with the dam and the way the indigenous people out in the forest were attacked unprovoked by white invaders, continuing Frozen's trend of having twists with only two possible reactions. What? A simple, straightforward story, but nonetheless a good one. It serves as a good way to explore the whole 4 new characters we have, and the one who looks actually interesting to explore, especially since there's a conflict between the Northuldra people and the Arendelle guards who've been stuck in the forest with them. So, does Frozen 2 do that?
No.
Most of the characters sit by the wayside twiddling their thumbs while Elsa discovers the secret of her powers, something that apparently the writers felt the need to focus on, and that takes us on a guiding tour of Nordic mythology. You know Nordic mythology, it's all about places. Once Elsa's mother mentioned Ahtohallan, I knew exactly where this was going, and I was right. The entire plot focuses on Elsa getting to Ahtohallan alone for some reason, and seeing the ice holograms that make up her own history. I mean, we could have just spoken to the Northuldra people about what happened, learn that the unprovoked attack from them was actually self-defense because Arendelle attacked unprovoked, had the main characters brush up against their biases and deal with that, but instead, let's have Elsa run to her death into an iceberg, learn the truth about Arendelle from some hallucinations, and then have Anna learn the truth by medium of instant snowman. And I know what you're gonna say, if we didn't have Ahtohallan, we wouldn't learn about the reason behind Elsa's powers. I'm just gonna say it, would that have been a bad thing? Elsa's powers didn't need an explanation to make the first movie good. I can't see why they would need one here. I know the explanation behind magic and the detailing of magic systems is something hardcore fans like to focus on, but do most people honestly give a shit? I know people who make clickbait theory videos about the
dark secret behind Frosty the Snowman's corncob pipe
will probably care a lot, but should an entire movie really have its story centered around trying to please those jackasses? The end result is that the things that matter get left by the wayside. The actually important themes are an afterthought concluded in the last 10 minutes. None of the characters get to do or act like more than watered down versions of themselves because all the focus is on the world. world. And all these problems lend themselves into the clashing art direction, where the movie's trying to force Frozen to be something it's not. You remember how in the lead up to Frozen 2, one of the biggest things people wanted was to give Elsa a girlfriend? I think that makes my point the best. What people wanted from this movie was more character-focused thing. We wanted Elsa to grow and continue that growth from the first film. We just wanted good things for Elsa, and really, who wouldn't? And it's telling that Jennifer Lee opted not to do that on the basis that she didn't think Elsa was ready for that. And you're right, she would have been ready by the end of the first film, but it's been 3 years and there's an entire other film of growth left to go. People act like this film was gay baiting Elsa and Honeymaren, and while gay baiting is a serious issue we need to take more seriously, this ain't it. Elsa and Honeymaren talk precisely once, and while they're passionate about what they're talking about, it's not really romantic, so to speak, and the two never spend any time together after that. If this is gay baiting, then the cuddling scene earlier in the film is a fucking steamy romance novel. I fall back on what I said in the glass of water video. The director just did not want Elsa to be gay, and she can't say that because Twitter would rightfully get on her case for it for a week, and as we all learned from the ContraPoint scandal, some people view a week of mockery as being the same as apparently. The focus on world building really tells me that the writers and the director really wanted to make another Frozen movie, but they didn't have an actual idea for it because Frozen was pretty neatly wrapped up and stood on its own merits. You could have gone and just let Elsa have a girlfriend, but that ultimately comes into the same problem as the world building focus we actually have. The only people who wanted a sequel are the people who had headcanons and theories they wanted to see validated. That's all Frozen 2 is, a Twitter post saying your headcanon is correct. Because Frozen 2 is a pandering film. It has everything the fandom trademark wants in a sequel. It has callbacks and references to the first movie. It has a little bit of gay baiting. It has characters watered down to one-dimensional versions of themselves to be easier for fandom culture to process and easily warp to whatever suits their fancy for their fan works, and it tries really hard to be in on the joke. None of this would have happened if you just gave people the gay princesses they always wanted. Just saying. I simultaneously have a lot to say about A Twist in Time and also very little. Talking about the film itself is actually pretty easy. The wicked stepmother goes back in time to ruin Cinderella's happily ever after, Cinderella says nuh-uh, and hilarity ensues. The rest of the film is an extended third act of the first one, punctuated with magic, slapstick humor, and the prince being a delightful himbo. It takes an opportunity to expand on characters that previously couldn't have been expanded on. I wouldn't say it fixes Cinderella, it doesn't. Cinderella didn't actually need fixing. Cinderella is more active in pursuing the prince, but that isn't a fix to the first one, because the first one was more about Cinderella clinging to hope to get her through what was honestly some pretty horrendous abuse. Cinderella doesn't get things handed to her, people show her compassion when she's in a hard spot. That's not a problem with the first film. The prince has more of a character, but that's not a fix of a problem in the first film. The prince was always a plot device, a means to an end, a way for Cinderella to have a nice night that she fucking deserved and then get out of this horrible place. This feels less like trying to fix the first film and more of just deciding to do something different because it might be fun to do something different. They didn't make Cinderella more active because the first movie needed to be fixed. They did it because it would be cool. They didn't make the prince more of a lovely dolt because it needed to be fixed. They did it because it would be fun. And this whole film really does feel like a fun time. The general attitude of the first film is still there. Because just like in the first film, you watch Cinderella get her hopes up and get them dashed multiple times before finally getting her happily ever after. The whole story centers around the fact that you want Cinderella to be happy because she deserves to be happy. This time around, it's just more wacky because why not? It really does feel like a film made by people who weren't all that interested in anything other than a film people would have fun watching. And honestly, I would make a case for this being the best Disney film ever made. Are there films with better writing? Of course. Are there films with better themes? Absolutely. Are there smarter or healthier films out there? Yes. But none of that compares to the sheer unbridled joy I experienced watching this movie. It's a simple movie in terms of stakes, but I was hooked on every single moment watching this because just like the first one, I just want Cinderella to have what makes her happy because it's what she deserves. It takes the simple joys of the first movie and makes it the central story, amping up everything with sheer unbridled ridiculousness. Watching this movie, I had so much straight up fun and laughed until my sides hurt on many occasions, and not a lot of animated movies can do that, especially these days. Despite only being made in 2007, it really shows just how worse animation has gotten in only a decade. Stories are less satisfying because they're so packed to the brim with twists and mysteries and subversions. They succumb to world builder's disease so frequently, and they're so fucking desperate to be seen as smart and be considered important and meaningful. And funnily enough, A Twist in Time does have a really good story in here about an abuse victim getting out of that cycle, and the stakes are kept personal so that forgiveness at the end is a lot more meaningful, especially when she makes things right. But it wouldn't be as impactful as it is if the film wasn't such a laugh riot from start to finish. Honestly, watching this film and just laughing my ass off completely and utterly really made me realize just how tired I am of all of this. I'm so tired of being angry and not being able to enjoy something without constantly worrying that's gonna vanish up its own ass. The Disney project as a whole was a much needed reprieve from the stagnant fucking mire of modern animation, but this one, this Disney sequel from 2007, that had no right to be as fun as it was, really just made the exhaustion set in. And I know I'm not alone in this feeling. The ratings for these shows and reception in general has always been tepid, despite how much fandom culture loses their mind over this stuff. These shows are proven to wither and fucking die. I've been grousing about this for a long time, and it's not like I enjoy doing that. People who paint me as an outrage merchant like to imagine that I just enjoy hating things and ruining the enjoyment for other people, but that's such a laughably, well, Disney villain caricature that I can't imagine anyone sincerely believing it for reasons other than reassuring themselves that their favorite things aren't actually problematic. You think I like coming up here every week to tell you guys another cartoon vanished up its own ass? I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. I hate every goddamn fucking second of it. But I keep doing it because they keep vanishing up their own fucking ass and just keep getting worse and worse. Just watch A Twist in Time and relearn what having fun means. It's fucking amazing, gay princesses, and we're done. We're done. We're done. Good night.